That is the ANC spokesperson, Pule Mabe, addressing media.
Of the Steering Committee of Conference, seized with the task of finalizing the credentials report. Having received all of the reports that were supposed to be placed before plenary, which include the organizational report, the Treasurer General's report, the relevant amendments impacting on this conference, the elections report and the research report linked to those elections, to give delegates to this conference a picture of where we are and where the ANC is located and the things that need to be done to ensure that going into the 2024 elections, we are better prepared, acknowledging our own areas of weaknesses, those things or issues that are negatives that affect what the ANC is supposed to be doing to win and garner much needed public confidence. So those reports have been placed before plenary in a closed session of our plenary. We then adjourned the meeting to allow delegates to go for dinner. They will be going back now at 7:30 to proceed with conference. Relevant committees dealing with commissions are also expected to sit now at 7 o'clock. When we go back to plenary, the credentials report will be presented for adoption. Once credentials are adopted, we will move to formalize and finalize on amendments. As some of the amendments impact on the composition of national officials. You are all aware that coming into this national conference and out of the national policy conference, one of the issues that came up was the introduction of the second Deputy Secretary General. You want finality on that so that if delegates agree on that, once all of the positions that have qualified during the nomination processes, whose nomination process was guided by the electoral guidelines adopted by this outgoing National Executive Committee as elected by the 54th National Conference of the ANC. Once all of those nominations are read out, having concluded on amendments, if there are further names raised from the floor, those names would need to garner sufficient numbers to be included on the ballot paper. To be exact, they need to garner about 25% of the total voting delegation to be included on the ballot paper. In the current form, and before any amendments or change to the positions or the composition of the national officials, the following positions will be read out, inclusive of who qualified for those. This is the position of President, the position of Deputy President, the position of National Chairperson, the position of Secretary General, the position of Deputy Secretary General, and the position of Treasurer General. And then what will then unfold would be the process I just outlined. If a position did not exist to form part of the national officials and that position is now being introduced, it means that nominations for that position will be called from the floor. And all of the names that qualified for that position would then be included on the ballot paper. What has been practiced is that when we need to deal with commissions and voting, we give the Electoral Committee, the Electoral Commission, which is an independent body appointed to run the electoral processes of the ANC, the space to prepare the ballot paper, time allowing. And when you start voting, if time permits, you would then draw your delegates, those that qualify to vote, out of commissions, if those are ongoing, to go and cast their votes. The practice has always been that we allow people to vote according to their provinces. We are still hoping to have all of this happen tonight. We are racing against time and have to do everything else possible to make sure that we cover sufficient grounds to fulfill the business of conference by the time we conclude. We are committed to the success of the 55th National Conference in the same way that we are committed to the unity of the African National Congress. Our appeal to members attending this national conference is that they must continue to carry themselves in a more disciplined manner and a way that upholds every value that the ANC stands for. When we outlined the rules of this conference, especially the do's and don'ts, we effectively said or pointed out to what we expect, the conduct and behavior that we expect of our delegates. We must also take this opportunity to thank provincial chairpersons of the ANC, provincial secretaries of the ANC, leaders of regions of the African National Congress, members of the National Executive Committee, who have made the space and time to talk to yourselves and affirm the need for delegates to carry themselves in a manner and way befitting of members of the African National Congress. We must also thank our delegates that, having had the leadership of their provinces and regions of the National Executive Committee, what the president would have said when he delivered the political report, went on to submit to such and have been conducting themselves in a manner and way that befits a member of the African National Congress. Like I said earlier on when we spoke, that we are going to do everything possible to make sure that when this conference rises on Monday, it shall have fulfilled what it came here to do. It will have a leadership that must lead the organization of the African National Congress at the national level, which is the National Executive Committee. It will have adopted resolutions arising out of the policy discussions that it shall have undertaken through a number of platforms, including the main one being the National Policy Conference. The Treasurer General, Comrade Pule Mabe, who's also responsible for the Secretary General's office, will come and talk to yourselves once all of these issues have been addressed. Where we are, the program of conference is fully on track. If there are questions of clarity that members of the media may want to bring forward, limited to what I spoke about, they are welcomed to do so. My friend from Cape Town has just raised his hand. Can we take all the hands? So I take it that this is the only hand we have. Okay, can we, there is a hand at the back. Well, of course, it is the voting of the officials that takes place tonight. When we spoke to yourselves yesterday, we did outline, and maybe I must emphasize this. Officials are only going to be voted once. Provincial secretaries have presented to the electoral committee the need not to stagger voting for officials, given the time limitations that we have already experienced. It is only fair that we run elections in that way. So we're hoping to still have everything happening today. Because when you don't make it as an official that has been nominated and that has been whose name was on the ballot, we will then, you'll then automatically be moved into additionals. So that is the approach, and that's how we are going to move. Should there be a need for us to come back and update you about any other matter that affects the business of conference, we shall do so. The Department of Information and Publicity, DIP, has already made a request to the President and other national officials to make a walkabout at the media village. If we succeed on that, we will also make you aware. There's a microphone.
Piet Kroukamp from the Vrye Weekblad. When will the media be allowed in? Will it be open sessions or closed sessions tonight?
Well, when we do nominations, if we'll get to that point tonight, we'll invite the media to that session. That will be an open session. So you are much closer to going back to plenary again. I have submitted the earlier request for yourselves to be able to be on the other side, so that you can, the side of the conference precinct, so that you can be able to interact with delegates and others who are here. If the request is adjudicated upon successfully or in the affirmative, I will again communicate to yourselves. I did indicate when I called for questions that let's take all the questions, then once we've taken all of them, then we move. So I can give you the benefit for now, but in future, let's ask all our questions when asked to do so that we answer them at once and conclude. Yes. Well, like I said earlier on, the party has not requested for any exemption. So what the facilities that we hire to run our events do, it's really an independent decision that they take outside the African National Congress. Must emphasize, the party will not ask for an exemption on matters that affect the rest of the country. We always stand on the side of our people. Whether it's on electricity, it's on jobs. We did the same even on COVID-19. I'm sure that clarifies your question. So, maybe you must teach me, guys, what happens when we ask for questions and they don't come, and while others are starting to ask, then questions come up. Is it creativity? It's creativity. Okay.
Thank you very much, and I'd assume that the ANC would allow us to be creative. But I just wanted to ask, spokesperson, is the ANC happy with the credentials currently of all delegates? And have there been any delegates that have been discredited based on, for whatever reason? This is from Salam Media.
Well, we are still yet to receive the credentials report. It is not the ANC that must be happy or not with the credentials. It must be the delegates. Credentials belong to the delegates. If the delegates adopt credentials, those credentials would then, become the decision of the meeting, and they will guide the adoption of any other matter or issue that needs adoption. So to try and make sure that creativity is kept within proper limits, we'll then close the briefing at this point. Thank you very much.